Tired of scrolling through synthesizer presets? Well, today I'm going to show you 5 different sounds and some simple concepts so that you can start making them on your own. Stay with me. Welcome back to the Five Dot Loft, where the process is the story. I'm Al Clark. Today I'm diving into sound design for atmospheric drum and bass, focusing on how to make lush, expressive pad sounds using Ableton Live's Wavetable synthesizer. I've been listening to a lot of LTJ Bukem and artists from Good Looking Records lately. That smooth, ambient, rolling D&B sound. The pads in those tracks create such a mood, such a vibe, and I wanted to understand how to build them for myself. So making simple choices like waveform selection, filter movement, envelope shaping. It's not as hard as it seems. So let's dive in and build some atmospheric pads. Okay, so we're here in Ableton Live and I have the Wavetable synth up here. You could see that I can expand it by hitting this button here. And as I shared in my last video, or 2 times ago, the fact that you can blow this thing up full screen and have no hidden menus, that is just brilliant. That is just such a cool part of what's going on here. All right, so let's listen to the first sound. And you can hear that there's a bass sound that's sort of undulating. And then on top, you kind of hear those like crystal drips. Okay, sounds complicated, but it really isn't. Remember, in Wavetable, we just have 2 oscillators, so 2 sound sources. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill all of these things in the matrix. Okay, and let's listen to the way the sound is now without any modulation, without any changes. In fact, let's take off the reverb from Valhalla Supermassive. We got a pretty static sound. Well, let's see where that's coming from. I'm going to turn off oscillator 1 and turn off oscillator 2 and 1, and you hear that I just have a sub here. I just have a sub going on. And then on oscillator 1, I have this basic dual 2, okay, out of all these choices. And what I like to do in the beginning when I'm sort of choosing a bass sound is I'll just go through waveforms, and then once I hit the sound, I'll just sort of sweep through it and imagine how is that going to sound if I modulate that, if I move that around. Same thing, and I'll just undo that so it hits, I'm at 50% in terms of the position. I'll turn off oscillator 1 and I'll go to oscillator 2, and that's again in the basics tab, but this is called no primes. And you hear like, I'll just sweep through it and I'll say, oh, okay, that'll be that kind of like chimey top thing. And so for these sounds, what I'm looking to do is to have sort of 2 paths. One is this sort of bass sweepy, not sweepy, but undulating, right, sound. And then on top of that, in a higher frequency, either something that sweeps or something that kind of flitters above it, or however you want to put it. Okay, so I got those 2 things happening here. Let's just take a look at the filters real quick. On my oscillator 1, I have a low pass filter, and you can hear that's the way it sounds all the way open, and I have it shut down to take out some of those high frequencies, okay? And then on oscillator 2 filter, right, I have this band pass filter, which creates this little triangle here, and I'll turn that on, and you're going to hear here that will be able to sweep that back and forth and create a sort of interesting sound. Okay, let's go back and we'll turn on sub 1 and oscillator 1 and take a look at our first envelope. That's the amp envelope. And what that's doing is that's creating the volume swell. So again, if I go down, remember I said this last time in my last synth video, ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release. So my attack is how fast the sound comes in. If I make it 0, it comes in instantaneously. If I bring it to what I've got it set at for here, which is what, 545 milliseconds, it just fades in. Remember, your sustain is how loud it's going to be when you hold down the key, and then your release is how long it lasts afterwards. Now, when we add the reverb, that's going to add to that tail. So we'll deal with that in a second. All right, so that's my swelling in of my sound. Let's go ahead and start to modulate this first sound, this first oscillator. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the oscillator position, okay, and I'm going to modulate that using the LFO. Now, what am I going to do here? Oscillator 1 position, LFO at 50%. Now watch what happens as I bring this LFO up. It starts to sweep. Now, I could make this as fast or slow as I want using the rate of LFO1, but here I've got this nice back and forth sweep for my bass sound. Also, what I want to do is on filter 1, on the frequency, I want to use this envelope 2 to open that filter up and then close it down to where it sits now. So start to see if you can follow me for this. It took me a while to figure this out. When you're applying an envelope to a filter, think in terms of this. The initial attack is the filter all the way open. The sustain at 0 is where you have the filter set to. So you can see I have the filter 1 set to 543, right? It's not up here. That's all the way open. I have it set to here. Now, what I want to happen is I want it to start open when I first press the key and then shut down to that point. So I put my attack at 0. I instantaneously, when I want to hit the key, I want the filter to be open. Then I want it to shut down. Here's my sustain. I want it to shut down to 0, which equals where I have it set at. The time it takes to go from all the way open to where I have it set at is the decay time. And I have that set to 189, 1 second, almost 2 seconds, okay? And so I click on, in order to do this, filter 1 frequency. I click on filter 1 frequency, and then I increase envelope 2, and I have it set at 72. And watch what happens when I hit the key. It's going to open it up and then shut it down. Not shut it down, bring it to where I set it at, my bass setting. Open and then close. Now, I could make this a longer time by bringing it all the way up here on the decay, or I can make it shorter, like make it like here, but I don't. I want to put it right. Okay, gives it some movement. All right, let's deal with this oscillator 2 piece. All right, first thing we want to do is we want to let that dance around. So I'm going to use the LFO2 set to random and a pretty high speed, and I'm going to apply that to the oscillator 2 position. So click on the oscillator 2 position, it reveals itself in the matrix, and then apply LFO2 at 100% and watch what happens to this waveform. So it's randomly going through the wavetable. That's sort of the secret to get that kind of like drippy, crystally effect. Now what we'll also do is we'll apply to frequency 2 of our filter 2, that bandpass filter, we'll also apply LFO2 at 100% to it. And you get this kind of like blippy sound. If I add my oscillator to it, my oscillator 1, okay, now let's go ahead and drench this in some Valhalla Supermassive, and you get this sound. Hear the kind of like crystalliness of it? All right, that's our first sound. Let's move on to our next one. All right, so let's take a look at our next sound. What did I call this one? I called this long sweep. This takes a while to develop. Again, a bass sound that's sort of undulating and changing, and then on top of it, kind of a crystally drip thing happening. All right, so let's figure out how we did this one. I'll turn off the reverb on this one. We have a sub. I'm going to turn off both oscillators. Oh yeah, let's kill all this modulation here for a second. And I've got this sub sound here. Turn that off. Here comes my oscillator 1. The category is complex, and this is called bitten filter. Again, I like to sweep through it. That's sort of cool in there, where it kind of goes to more of like a sine wavy kind of thing, and then gets more complex. That's nice. When I'm looking for sounds, I'm sort of looking for that, like what can change that'll keep my interest, the audience's interest. Okay, let's take a look at oscillator number 2 here. So it's in the basic category. This is called the harmonic series. And you can see we go from sine wave, and then that sine wave just adds harmonics. It doesn't go to like a triangle or a sawtooth. It just sort of adds more harmonics to it, which is interesting. But they're all different. So again, if we modulate that, we're going to get a nice. If we change it, right, modulate, we're going to get a nice. We're going to get a nice effect here. All right, so let's take a look at this amp envelope again. We've got. I'm going to go back to oscillator 1. We've got it sweeping in over the course of 1 second. We have it sustaining. It takes 2 seconds to get down to the sustain, and then on the release is 3 seconds. So you get a nice pad sound going through that. My LFOs over here, I have a sine wave set pretty slow to 0.06. And again, on LFO2, I have this random, this time set up pretty high at 10 Hertz. All right, so let's start to see what our filters are set at. Again, on oscillator 1, I have a filter that is not completely bright, but shut down to take out some of those high harmonics. Sorry about that. And then on oscillator number 2, again, we've got this band pass, which is going to give us this really interesting effect if we modulate that randomly, which is what we're going to do. So let's take a look at this. Oscillator 1 position, we'll go back to oscillator 1 and we'll get that sweep thing happening with LFO1. So oscillator 1 position, click on it, it appears down in the matrix. I'm gonna modulate it or change it with LFO1. So I go to LFO1 and what's that set at? That's set at minus 50%. So it'll start by going down. So it goes down. Okay, now oscillator 2, we'll go to oscillator 2 position, okay, and we'll also modulate that with we're going to modulate that with LFO2. That's going to be the random piece. So oscillator 2 position with the random piece, we're going to bring it up to 50. The reason why we went minus 50 with LFO1 because I wanted it to start going down. If we went plus 50 with this, just want to show you, it'll start by going up because it's just a wave. Either up is plus, down is minus. So I don't want it to go up. I want it to go down. So I want it to start by sort of sweeping downward, which there's nothing wrong with it going up or down. I just found it sort of sounded more cool. And you can hear what's going on oscillator 2. Again, we have this kind of random piece going on. And again, what we're going to do is I'll go over to that frequency of the bandpass filter on oscillator 2, and I'll go and I'll control that at 100% with LFO2, the random. So now we get random position on LFO2 and random bandpass filter, and that gives it that sort of drippy sound to it. We'll add the oscillator, and then we'll add and we get this interesting sound. Now, if we wanted to, and we wanted to add some unison to this, we could add like classic unison, and we'll go 10% on that. Which gives it a cool sound. Let's see if we can add some bass to it successfully this time. Cool. Little drums. And that's sound number 2. Let's see what's going on with sound number 3. All right, so what we've got going on here is a little bit different. We still have that second oscillator doing that kind of random drippy thing. But this time on oscillator 1, we have a clear sweep. Nice. All right, so let's figure out what's going on here. I'm going to turn off the reverb. I'm going to turn off oscillator 2. This time we have no sub going at all. And I'm going to clear all of these modulation sources. And let's just This is what we've got going on for oscillator number 1. Almost sounds like an organ patch, right? Doesn't it sound like an organ patch a little bit? All right, so that's what we got going on there. Again, let's move down to the amp envelope. I've got an attack of 2, decay of 2.9. My sustain is all the way up, so it never drops down. And then my release is at 4 seconds. So a nice, big, slow amp envelope, giving me a nice, slow fade in of the sound, and then a nice, slow fade out of the sound. On the oscillator 2 side, what do we've got going on here? We have harmonics sines 3. So basically sine waves with added harmonics. Interesting. And I've got that set in the middle because we're going to modulate that again with that random LFO. So what do we have in terms of filters? Again, for oscillator 2, we have that nice band pass down here, and you're going to be able to hear that as I sweep through this. So if we set that to that random amount, that's going to skip around and give us that drippy sound. And then for oscillator 1, again, what we're doing here is just merely taking that brightness and bringing it down, right? So here's the unique thing about this patch. We're going to use envelope 2 to not only modulate the position of oscillator 1, but also the frequency of the filter. And so we're going to do that by placing the attack of envelope 2 to 0. So that means whatever we have it set at, instantly it's going to start there, and then it's going to come back down to our sustain level, 0. Now remember, when we apply an envelope to a filter, the 0 mark of the sustain is the place where you put the filter. So 0 represents 693 over here. So it's going to filter down to that point, but it's going to start at its highest point here, which is open. And then it's going to sweep down. Well, same thing with the oscillator position. It's going to start at a certain level, and then it's going to sweep down to the point that we set it at. Now, we set this at 0 at the bottom, so watch what happens. And, of course, how long does that take to happen? That's the decay, 6.3 seconds. Okay, so envelope 2s, we have it at oscillator 1 position is at 59. So oscillator 1 position, envelope 2, we have that at 59. And that gives us this sound. Again, it's going to instantly start up here, okay? That's at the top of the envelope. And then it's going to progress down to 0, 0 being what we set it here at. If I set this up here, it's going to go to 0, but I have it set at 40%. It's going to go to wherever you set it to. I wanted to set it all the way here. Now, what we'll also do is apply that same envelope to the filter frequency. So I'll go to filter frequency 1, and I'll take that envelope 2 and I'll crank it up to filter frequency 1, envelope 2, up to, I can't see this, 56. And I'll go to 56 and watch what happens to that filter. It starts, see where it's, I'm just flicking this, it starts all the way open, and then goes down to the point that I set it out, the 0 mark, over the course of 6.3 seconds. So over that time period, it's both moving the position of the waveform down and closing that filter down. That's how we're getting that sort of classic sweeping sound that you heard in a lot of, that you still hear today in atmospheric D&B. And in a lot of other places too. All right, let's now deal with oscillator 2. Well, it's going to be the same drill as before. Oscillator 2 position is LFO1. LFO1 is set to, I have it, instead of set to a hertz rate, I have it set to 16th notes. And oscillator 2 position, LFO1, is going to be set to 28. So oscillator 2 position, LFO1, that's going to be set to 28. And that's going to sound like that. Set that to 28. So it's just bouncing all over the place. Now, if I were to increase this, you see it just gets wider. And if I were to decrease it, it just gets smaller. Okay? So how far it goes, the amplitude, is set by the amount. So think amplitude amount, AA. All right, and let's also do this frequency as we've been doing the past two patches. So we're going to move that bandpass around with the same filter, and that's going to be set at 14. So frequency filter 2, frequency LFO1, set to 14. And now we're bouncing around. And so now combine that with the oscillator 1 and we get a sweep and a drip. Okay? Now, if I add this Valhalla string thing, and that's set to string ambience, I think it's called. Listen to this. That gives it that nice, rich, there's almost like a chorus effect happening there. Because I hear some movement in the bass sound that's not coming from the synth. Nice. All right, let's hear this with a little bit of the track. Drums turned way down. Yeah. That sounds great. All right, let's look at this fourth patch. All right, so sound number 4, I have it marked as harmonic sweep, and let's hear this straight away. So no crystally drips this time. Got that sweeping sound. So you have that sound that's underneath, and then you have that sound on top, that sort of harmonic sweep that's coming down. And then underneath, you've got this like undulating basic sound. All right. How do we get to this point? Well, let's kill all these matrices again, and let's go ahead and listen to oscillator 1. Okay, interesting. And let's listen to oscillator 2 isolated. There's that harmonic, that sort of fuzzy, sine wavy thing with lots of harmonics. Nice. Okay, together. Okay, and again, we've got, I'm just going to go to oscillator 1. On amp envelope, we've got 1 second on our attack, 1 second on the decay. We're bringing it down to -3 dB and 3 second release time. So nice slow pad sound. Now, a lot of the work here is coming from this oscillator. I'm just getting where I'm at here. Is coming from this envelope 2. Again, let's take a look. We have 0 attack time, 11 seconds to decay down to 0, and then a release time of 11 seconds too. Now, what's controlling what here? Envelope 2 is going to control the oscillator 2 gain and the filter 2 frequency. So that's going to be this sweep. So let's work on oscillator 2 first. So let's do the filter 2 frequency is envelope 2 at 90. So filter 2 frequency, okay, that's set to a high pass, and that's going to be envelope 2 at 90. And so that's going to sound like this. See, it has a high pass filter. So it starts all the way here and then lets those high frequencies pass, or lets them in. There's nothing low in there, right? So that's what's creating that sweepy sound. And now what we also want to do is we want to, oscillator 2 gain is envelope 2. So oscillator 2 gain, that's here. And that's also going to be controlled by envelope 1. So what's that going to do? That's going to start loud, and over the course of 11 seconds, go to 0 or silence. So listen. And then the gain, the volume drifts out, because I don't want that sound to sustain over the other sound. I just want it to sweep. So I control the filter using the envelope to sweep it, but then I use the same filter to control the volume of it so that it goes to 0 and I don't hear it anymore. I'm just using oscillator 2 as a sweeping, like a harmonic sweep sound. All right, let's turn that off and work on oscillator 1. Well, oscillator 1 is just simply, we just want this thing to just pulse a little bit. So what we'll use is the oscillator 1 position will be LFO1 at 36. So oscillator 1 position, LFO1 at 36. Let me type that in, 36. Little bit of movement there, but then what we'll also do is the filter 1 frequency will also be, filter 1 frequency will also be controlled by LFO1. Get this to play here, and you can see here down in that that oscillator 1, it's just pulsing back and forth, giving us, just opening and closing that filter just ever so slightly to pulse and give us a little bit of sound. So now if we hear them both together, you get a sweep and then a pulse. That sound disappears, and what we're left with is just that pulsing sound. And if we add our beautiful Oh, I think we have, I'm sorry, we had the reverb on the whole time, which is fine. What is this, number 4? Every time it hits, it sweeps. One more to go. This last sound, I really wanted to do some sort of white noise sweep. So let's take a listen. That wind sound. First heard that in Frank Zappa's Don't Eat Yellow Snow, right? From Apostrophe. 74, I think. Really wanted to get that. There is no white noise patch waveform in here, so let's just take a look at that one first. So we're just looking at oscillator 2. Nice, and I'm going to turn off the reverb. So what's going on here? So a couple of things. We have the noise waveform set to radio 1, okay? And then I have, and we haven't used this before, I've got one of these effects up here that are within within each oscillator. So if you turn this off to none, okay? If you turn that on, and I had to really kind of tweak this, tune it to 40, and set the amount to 100, okay, that's giving me that sort of white noise sound. And then all we're really doing here is we're just sweeping this filter to frequency with, I changed it to envelope 3, it could be envelope 2, but again, we have a band pass filter here, right? That's all that is a band pass filter, and then I have it controlled from envelope 3. So again, it starts all the way open, and then over the course of 11 seconds comes all the way down to 0, which is all the way down to here, and then it just stays there. Okay, so that's what's going on oscillator 2. That's like our nice filters noise sweep. On oscillator 1, again, I have something interesting happening with these effects. So without the effect here, all I have is just a retro saw sweep. And I could have swept it this way, which we've been doing for the past 4 of these, by sweeping the oscillator position. But instead, what I'm doing is I'm putting a pulse width on it. And this is apparently from sort of old school synthesis. And I'm going to take that off, that LFO1 off. And you can hear and if I turn up the sync, sort of wacky things can happen. And I believe that is at a 34 pulse width. I'm sorry. The pulse width is, I believe, at 34. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hitting that with is just this LFO, and that's set to a rate of 4. So that's going to follow every 4 bars. That's going to do a full sweep. And that's going to be set at LFO1 is going to be set at 20 on that pulse width. And I'll set that here, and I don't think that was set at 34. The pulse width was set at 40. Or was that the other one? Yeah, it was 40. There it is. And now let's add the oscillator 2. That'll sweep that like that. And now we'll add a little bit of reverb. Oh yeah. That's cool. And let's see if we can get it happening here. You can see again down here in this filter, that's just sweeping down. The bass. Having some drums. That's it for this week in the 5 Dot Loft. Just a few simple pad sounds, but hopefully it gave you a sense of how you can start shaping on your own. If you enjoy this kind of process-based content, a like, a subscribe really helps keep me inspired. And if you have a favorite pad, trick, a question, or just want to share what you're working on, drop it in the comments. I'm Al Clark. This is the 5 Dot Loft. We'll see you next week.